Welcome back. Today we will talk about the Daytona from the 60s to the current period. Let's start. The Rolex Daytona is one of the most iconic and beloved watch models in the world. Known for its elegance, functionality, and durability, this watch has a long and interesting history that has its roots in the world of motor racing. It all began in the 1960s, when the sports watch market was booming. Rolex, which had always made innovation and quality its hallmarks, decided to enter the racing watch market with a model that suited the needs of professional pilots, remembering that many pilots of the time actually wore a Rolex during their races. The Rolex Daytona was the first sports chronograph to go on the wrist of a driver during an American race or speed trial. The name is linked to Daytona Beach, which was, from 1903 to 1935, the stage of some of the most memorable speed records. An example is Malcolm Campbell, who on board the Bluebird 5, a 2,300 HP car, reached 445 km per hour wearing a Rolex, and this suggests that Campbell was probably the first, or one of the first, true international testimonial, and natural, by Rolex. In those years, the Rolex Daytona was not even an idea, because the first cosmograph will debut only in 1963. But the association between Rolex and Daytona, between the brand and speed, had laid the foundations for the genesis of a legend. The increase in speed brings out the limits of the Daytona Beach, whose surface is not compact enough. Daytona Beach does not disappear from the circus, but evolves, transforming itself into a circuit. It is the dawn of the NASCAR Championship, National Association for Stock Car Racing, but soon this strip of sand on the ocean begins to give way under the weight of the races, which is why the president of NASCAR, William France, proposes the construction of a permanent concrete circuit, which debuted in 1959. At that time, there is still no trace of the Rolex Daytona, but Rolex is now part of Daytona Beach's DNA. In 1963, the first Rolex Daytona, Ref 6239, was introduced to the world and featured a 722/1 manual winding movement. The design of the watch was inspired by motor racing and had a steel tachymeter scale bezel that allowed drivers to calculate average speed based on distance traveled. The dial was available in 3 color options: black, white, and cream. Initially, the Rolex Daytona was not very successful. However, in 1965, his luck changed when the famous Formula One driver Paul Newman wore his Rolex Daytona during one of his races. From then on, the Daytona became a cult object among watch and motor racing enthusiasts. The Daytona worn by Paul Newman with his wife's phrase, "Drive carefully," engraved on the case back was auctioned for about $18 million by the Phillips Auction House and holds the record for the most expensive wristwatch in an auction. Also in '65, the Daytona evolves once again, shaping itself according to the needs of the riders. The pump buttons are replaced by screw buttons, which guarantee water resistance and avoid the accidental activation of the chronograph while driving. The steel bezel is replaced by a black plexiglass ring on which the tachymeter scale is engraved. Over the next few years, Rolex continued to refine the Daytona's design, introducing new materials and new features. In 1988, for example, the Daytona Zenith was presented. In those years, Rolex did not produce automatic chronograph movements in-house and therefore collaborated with the Zenith Maison to produce a new movement based on the Zenith El Primero movement, but with a profoundly modified base. The frequency is raised to 36,000 from 28,800 vibrations per hour. The case grows from 36 mm to 40 mm. Another great advantage of the Daytona throughout its life cycle is that Rolex has never succumbed to the temptation to insert the date window, which would have made a chronograph born for competitions less credible, undermining its aesthetic balance. The year 2000 is an important date because Rolex consolidates its success by launching an in-house mechanical movement, the Caliber 4130, a chronograph that focuses on a design aimed at efficiency, simplification of service operations, and with a maximum reserve of 72 hours of charge. An example of Daytona that certainly does not go unnoticed is the Leopard, Ref 116598, so called because of the strap and the dial, which are leopard. It became famous after being seen on the wrist of American actor Nicolas Cage, and started the trend of watches made to attract attention. In 2005, Rolex launched the first ceramic bezel on the GMT Master II, and in 2016 it transformed the steel bezel of the Rolex Daytona into a ceramic graduated disc, manufactured according to the patented Cerachrom process. The Cerachrom bezel appears on the Daytona for the first time in 2011 on an 18-karat Rolex Daytona E-Rose reference 116515LN, with Arabic numerals, chocolate dial and leather strap. In 2018, at Basel World, Rolex presented the new version of the Daytona Rainbow, this time with a rose gold case. But before moving on to its brief description, why is it called Daytona Rainbow? It is easy to say, just look at the bezel that does not mount a tachymeter scale, but a long row of 36 baguette-cut sapphires whose colors ideally reproduce the shades of the rainbow. The name is not pure fantasy, but in this case it is supported by Rolex, which has associated this model with the reference 116595RBOW, in which the last four letters are clearly a summary of rainbow. In 2023, on the occasion of the 60th anniversary, the Rolex Daytona underwent a major update. The model has not been distorted in size and general proportions, and it could not be otherwise for the chronograph par excellence, and one of the most admired watches ever. But the interventions, both aesthetic and technical, are anything but secondary. The dial provides for a greater contrast between the chronograph counters and the base of the dial itself, in order to better highlight the V geometry. The case has also been updated, with a series of slight modifications, especially in the area of the lugs, to refine shape further. But the big news is hidden in the watch. It is the new caliber 4131, which replaces the 4130 movement, and brings with it a number of new features. First of all, it mounts for the first time a skeletonized oscillating weight, which is presented in gold on the top of the range models, and a bridge finish that the brand defines as Côtes de Genève Rolex. It differs from the classic decoration for a thin, shiny groove between one streak and another. The Rolex Daytona Platinum 2023 is the only model in the range to mount a transparent glass on the back, which allows the renewed caliber to be admired. In conclusion, the Rolex Daytona is much more than just a watch. It represents a symbol of style, elegance, and success. This iconic wristwatch has a long and fascinating history. But beyond its fame, the Daytona also represents the art and craftsmanship of luxury watchmaking. By watching this video, we hope you enjoyed the beauty and precision of this timepiece, and that it inspired you to learn more about the history and significance of this brand. Thanks for watching, subscribe and share.